have a couple of more people coming in. All right, so Jesse and Kendall, come on up. I'm gonna turn off this bright light. Sit right here because that's where the camera is, okay? Let's see, I'm gonna turn that off and I'm gonna turn some lights on. Okay, I got the microphone.
Remember, if we have questions, we have to pass the microphone.
I know, so that's what I'm gonna do is I'll go out and I'll give them this.
Oh, okay.
So there's that.
Okay.
Okay, and Viv, do you have it up? Okay, all right. So, Nikki, do you think you're gonna have anyone else? Okay, so yeah, we'll just filter them in, funnel them in. Okay, again, thanks everybody for being here. A lot of you I've had you before in my classes or I've met you. Come on in, come in. So we might have a few people.
Yeah.
Okay, again, this is a speaker series that we're gonna do most months, although, so next month we're doing it. In May, we're doing something a little bit different. We're gonna be doing a LinkedIn workshop, because that's the very last semester, or the last month of school, and we actually won't be here the last Wednesday of the month, but we're gonna be doing a LinkedIn workshop where we'll have some people coming in and help you do your LinkedIn profile and things like that, and we'll put out information about that. And we'll have some industry partners coming to help with that. But today we have Kendall, and Kendall was here before and pitched in a little bit with the conversation from last month. Kendall is the Director of Operations from EdgeCore. Again, these conversations are kind of focusing around data centers, but I want you to think broadly. It relates to any IT, right? And so I know a lot of you are in different programs and you're pursuing different things in the world of IT, so I don't want you to get stuck on the fact that Kendall and Jesse are from data centers. Like, they're able to talk about a broad range of things that are gonna apply to a lot of different fields, okay? And then Jesse's here for the first time, so Jesse is the Safety Director at Stack.
Stack Infrastructure.
Stack Infrastructure. Okay, so what I'm really excited about with Jesse is I think a lot of times what I find with students particularly, and probably even myself if I think back to it, when I was younger and going into the field, I wasn't thinking about safety, okay? Because there's a lot of things that you might be doing that you aren't thinking about at this point. Moving devices, racking, stacking, finding yourself in ceilings, in attics, pulling cable in basements, running. So there's just a lot of things, even paper, right? Just paper and stuff like that. I mean, I just remember, again, back in the day, reams and reams and reams of paper that we were having to deal with because of the data that we were collecting and or having to move from place to place. So again, they're going to talk about kind of the ins and outs of a data center, some of the different things to think about. It's not so much focused on like the last time where we were talking a lot about jobs. Not that we're not open to answering those kinds of conversations, those kinds of questions, but we want to learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of the data center, and then see how would that apply to other types of IT jobs. Okay. All right.
Awesome. As she said, I am Director of Operations for EdgeCore Digital Infrastructure. We have a data center over in Mesa. If you guys haven't seen some of these technology corridors going around the valley about data centers, keep an eye out. Obviously, on this side of town, we've got the Goodyear Buckeye area, which you could speak to. I think that's more down by like around the Litchfield Airport. I guess they're all around that area. The Goodyear Airport, yeah. That's kind of the big hub that you're going to see. A lot of construction around there. On the East Valley where I'm at, Elliott Road between Signal Butte and Power, that like 4 or 5 mile stretch is kind of been designated by the city of Mesa as like a technology corridor. So if you go out there even today, right now, Apple Data Center is there on Signal Butte's corner. We're down just a mile from them. NTT is north of us. Right next to us, our neighbor Meta has got this massive infrastructure that they're putting out, that they're building in over there. There's a small little data center on Ellsworth called Comarch. You go down the road towards 202, there's Edge connects, and then further down towards Sossaman, and Google's building down there, right? So all along that corridor, it's not like a mistake that why is all these data centers growing in these different kind of plots of area? Why are they all together? Chandler has a space off of Price Road. Cyrus One is with the big campus right there, but you've got Wells Fargo down there, just all north of Intel. And what you're going to find is, a lot of times there's this need for land and power, right? So that's where some of this big infrastructure kind of comes from. And if you think about it, think about where did data centers kind of come from, and what are they about? I mean, I think, a lot of people kind of talk about the kind of surreal ideas about trying to explain to what a data center is. Even my family to this day is still like, what exactly do you do, right? Like, that's a hard thing to kind of get their mind wrapped around. And you can give the kind of basic definition. Well, you consider where all the computers got to get housed, right? They got to get housed in some physical place, right? And so there's a big facility infrastructure that kind of houses all the servers. It's another way to think about it too, is like right now as we think about what the digital world is versus the real world, the physical world, the data centers are the crossroads of where that all happens, right? That's where that all becomes reality, right? So that is the place. Even in the IT world, even if you're not working at a data center, you're going to be tied to it one way or another, whether or not you want to, right? When they talk about distributed systems and how that distributed computing is going around, failing over across, cities and across the country, because if you got, business continuity plans where, hey, if this data center goes down, you're going to shift all of your compute to another area, right? All of those type of thoughts is about where these data centers located. And a lot of times they're going to be in these big metropolitan areas. More and more, they're going to be in the metropolitan areas. You will see some places where people have kind of started to strike out to say, hey, there's power that's cheap, there's land that's available out in the middle of nowhere. But one thing that I've noticed, especially growing up in this industry in the past 15 years, is that a lot of the land we were buying was farmland. And so we started to joke around, we know what we're doing. We're growing data, right? Because we are consuming data on a moment-to-moment basis. We are tied to our data, right? And 20 years ago, when I got out of the military, I actually was part of Lucent Technologies and was helping with laying fiber, because that was one of the big things. We're like, hey, we need to build this digital infrastructure to put fiber across the country. And I actually got hooked into when cell phones were kind of starting to come up, in that time frame. But we couldn't even envision, like, what do you mean you're going to need to have a picture on your phone or a camera on your phone? What do you even need that for, right? But now it's like inherent in what we do, right? And even more so the conversation back then was like, well, the technology is going to improve. We're going to improve latency across the country, where it's going to be seconds for data to get across the country. So data centers can be wherever across the world. But the data usage has gone so much more, where the need has been like, now you need to get that data closer and closer to the consumers. So that's where these data centers, you're going to see them building up all around these big metropolitan areas, because the best answer to latency is just get it closer to the ones that need it, right? And so along that front, these metropolitan areas are that. But I would also even think about, like, why does it need to be like that instantaneous? Well, look at the technology we've got. We've gotten to the point where we've got self-driving cars, right? Like, you need that data to be accurate at that moment, right? You cannot be losing that connection and being thrown off, right? I mean, that's part of that stuff. Now, obviously, there's different ways of distributed systems that you can kind of help yourself out with that. But still, that is part of this thought process about having these big hubs across metropolitan areas, where you're going to see all of these nodes for you network guys that understand, like, these are the big nodes across the country, and there's going to be data centers right there with them, right? So the other part that I think about with data centers, because I'm a little bit of a historic kind of buff and nerd on that stuff, who knows what the ENIAC is? Anybody familiar with what that is? So that's kind of considered the first programmable computer that was done in 1946. But if you fact check me, Mark I was probably the very first computer, but in 1944. However, it wasn't necessarily the programmable. The big difference that ENIAC did was that it could actually store numbers Of course, it did basic math computations, right? Essentially, was an overgrown calculator for us, right? The idea that made that so much better was that it could actually store numbers and do kind of recursive computing. You could actually you could actually have it like do multiple kind of algorithms by storing and recalculating things. And the speed that it took was 1,000 times faster than anything at that time. But the concept that I like to key on with data centers, that first computer, the ENIAC, was took up 1,800 square feet. So I don't know about you, but my house isn't even that big. Right, I have 1,100 square foot. It's just me and my wife. But so to think of a computer as big as that, right? I mean, this room, I don't know, is this room even 1,000 square feet, right? Like, so that size, and then the power it took to kind of power that was, I think it was about 180 kW. So the scale of things has changed over the years. And even though we've changed like efficiencies of it, what typically happens with human nature, just like anything, you're going to be more efficient, you can get more out of it, well, they're just going to use it more, right? You have a car that you used to get 15 miles per gallon, well, now you can get 100 miles per gallon, where you're going to drive that much more, right? Because you can afford to drive it that much more. So that's what's going on with computing right now as well. It's like, how much more computing can we get, right? And how much more can we start tying things together? I mean, I think that's where some of the ideas around even like cloud computing and being able to say like, hey, it doesn't have to be just from this one computer. You can have virtual machines. You can use multiple computers to act like one, right? That's that kind of idea of kind of compounding that. So the idea of where data centers are and why they're becoming what they are, it's absolutely driven by what the technology is of the time. And so I would say, 10 years ago, having a data center that was maybe like a 10 megawatt data center was a pretty good size. And, having a full building, that maybe was 20 megawatts, and then having maybe a campus, and I ran a campus of about 8 buildings, we had like 120 megawatts of power for that whole campus, which is a lot. But nowadays, just kind of forecasting for where we're going with all of this, the computing requirements of what AI is kind of telling us. For those of you who don't know, right, for what the Google search power, the power behind a Google search of how much compute that was doing, and the power consumption that goes behind that compute, compared to what an AI ChatGPT search is, it's 1,000 times more compute that AI is doing now. So where we're going to go with this, all of a sudden, everyone is saying, shoot, how much more dense, how much further can we get with making a data center act essentially like a single computer. So that whole original idea of a computer taking up a whole room, and now we've kind of shrunk everything down and we fill the room with multiple computers. They're going back to that idea of now, hey, all of those servers, all those racks that you had of computers that would be filling up a typical data hall that I've seen is 30,000 square feet. Now think of all of those computers now working as one, right? As one compute. And then with the idea of what AI is, also the limitations, at least at this point, is like they want to be able to keep those computers as close to each other and as dense as possible. So now they're looking at, hey, not only can I have a data hall work as a computer, can I have a data hall right next door work as a computer too? Now it's across 2 data halls. Now is it across a whole building where all of the data halls in that building is actually like a single computer? And then on a campus level, because now you can have multi-mode fiber that's keeping it close enough around that, so it's not miles away, but it's all within several acres on a campus. All of those buildings can work as one big huge computer. So in the end, what does that mean? That could mean Skynet for us, right? That could mean the end of the world. But whatever. Part of me says I'm all in. Let's see where it takes us. I believe in humanity. So along that front, I would say the aspect that I heard from a lot of the questions even previously to this was, where we're going with data centers and what to do with what you guys are looking for, a career path. Like, what are you wanting to become and do with this? I do believe that there is lots of ways you can take your IT path and do good in the world. And I think that's one thing that even as I fell into the data center world, I didn't recognize that necessarily. But I think most of the thing was I had got my GI Bill out of the military. I needed to use it. I didn't use it right away because I fell into a nice union job with Lucent, and so I thought I was set until tech bubble burst, and I got laid off because the company went under. And it's like, oh, that's why I need my degree. That's why I need to go back to school, right? So long and winding road, after high school and going through the military, I was the 35-year-old guy, at ASU trying to work through to get my network engineering degree, So I would say, you never know where these things kind of take you. But even with that network engineering degree, what I ended up doing with it is what I'm doing now is operations. But I just kind of fell into that role, right? So I knew I wanted to work at a data center. That was one thing that I did actually hone in on from my classes. Like, hey, if you want to be around that stuff, somehow in that pathway, I heard all the different types of possible network jobs that you could kind of do with it. That was what I was really thinking of, mostly because I realized I was a bad programmer and my dreams of becoming a video game, guru was gone. And I realized, it's as much an art form as it is as a talent, and I realized with my programming where it was like I had to have real structured notes about what each line of code was doing, whereas other guys could just throw it together and make it work, and that wasn't me, right? So I knew, I was like, okay, but I knew I also wanted to get into that because I wanted to make money. I wanted to make $100,000 a year. That was my goal, coming out of the military. How do I get to 100 G's? What is that going to take? And all was pointing me towards computers, right? So I knew I wanted to get into data centers. So the first data center I get into, after I got a job with a knock, and I was going to be working in their network operations center. But the first 2 weeks there, I was, I all of a sudden they were like, you're the new guy. The facilities guys need a body. So guess what? You're the guy. You're going to be going with them. I don't know what they need, but they need you to do something. And next thing you know, I am taking this checklist because apparently they were commissioning the other half of the data center, and they needed somebody to do rounds, which was to go around and check all these gauges on generators, on UPSs, on Cray units, on different mechanical and electrical things. And I was like, wow, what is all of this? And it aligned more with my natural skill set because I do realize, and this is where that part of it was, even though I was pushing myself to become a network engineer and all that, my aptitude for sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours on end was not great. Right? I knew that I would lose focus. I wasn't the greatest. So being able to get up and get around. So having that opportunity to now go to the facilities team and say like, oh, hey, I'm over on this side, but I'm making the same amount. I could make the same amount of money. How do I stay on this side? And so that's kind of where I ended up, more on the facility side. So now I'm dealing with all of the physical infrastructure around it. And so that's kind of where I'm going next with this topic, is that now when you talk about a data center, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes with keeping it up, right? Because of what we talked about of how important it is to keep a data center running and all of that. There is also now this group of people that are around all the time to support it. Now, the on-site staff may not actually be a whole lot. I mean, maybe having 10 people overnight is a lot, and I think typically we talked a little bit before about like a smart hands crew, where maybe the network engineer isn't even there. He's actually remote, or her is remote, and they actually are, they are telling them, hey, I need you to, console in, and I need you to take a look at something, right? And so that's where that on-site personnel would be that. But so that's why we were saying that is kind of that entry-level tech job as a data center person to get into that to this field, especially kind of coming out of the certifications that you guys are doing. Sometimes that can get you into there a lot easier, right? But then from there, now that you're into that side, now you can start looking at all the needs that they do. And to your point earlier, there are so many other parts of the IT world that you don't even understand that somebody's doing something. So like from the facilities aspect, there's actually a bunch of systems controls with automated controls for running cooling systems, right? Monitoring electrical systems. So there's actually a lot of things that they need to pay attention to, how that network is working and how robust it is and how responsive it is, because I need to get my alarms to my phone all the time when I have a critical issue. So the facilities team is doing the same thing. So, there are IT professionals that actually kind of specialize in that infrastructure side of it, which is, you know, I wish I had known some of that stuff, because maybe that's where I would have concentrated some of my programming aspects. But I'm happy where sometimes it's better to be lucky than knowing all this stuff, right? And so falling into the position, I'm happy where I'm at. But just want you guys to be open to that idea. It's like, so suffice it to say, I stayed on that facility side. I've never done anything with my network engineering degree since, right? But yes, I'm making more than $100K a year, right? I've gotten to this level where it didn't take long. And I think that's the other part of this. If you're good at what you do, because the data center world is so small on talent level, and that's why we're kind of reaching out in this way. A lot of us are professionals that are volunteering to kind of reach out to the community, because there is a dearth of talent, not a depth of talent, but a lack of talent, a lack of skill sets, a lack of experience out there. So we're just trying to pull anybody we can a lot of times. So just being the person that's there and doing well at your job, sometimes that's enough to get you noticed, right? And then also to hear about the opportunities that these companies are opening up within those places that they don't necessarily advertise. Sometimes those roles are actually being created because you're stepping up, somebody's stepping up and saying, hey, I noticed there's a gap here. Nobody is kind of correlating the facilities reporting stuff. This is the need that I have. I have reporting needs that I need to pull trends and graphs and all this type of data. So I need a guy who could actually a person who could pull all this data for me and present this in a consumable way that we can review on a regular basis. But we don't have that, because that's not necessarily a role that you just hire off the street. A lot of times this is where we're actually like pulling, there's a IT professional who knows about facilities, or there's a facilities guy who knows a little bit about the IT things. So I'm trying to like marry both worlds a lot of ways, because there are these kind of gaps in the industry that actually do need to be filled. And so then you'll see like a lot of those roles, they'll grow into either program management roles, because now they understand, hey, this is what it takes to work in a data center. These are the needs of a data center, and these are the needs of the customer, as the guy who's having to run his person who's running his servers and actually having to pay attention to all of the network aspects of it and what they need, and like being able to marry that up with the on-site guys, right? So having said that, there's a lot of big infrastructure that goes with it, and a lot of other service providers that are joined around a data center, even like that kind of hemisphere around a data center. So even if they're not tied to them, I've got emergency vendors on the hook that have to respond, that have to be able to be in our aspect of being able to stay online. A lot of times data centers will have contracts in place to have that in place. And a lot of reasons why, let me kind of back up here a second. Among data centers, there are two big types, right? Enterprise data centers and co-location data centers. And when I say enterprise data centers, I'm talking about like the Meta, the Apple. They're making their data center themselves. They have their own operators inside of it. They have their own people in charge of it. And they may go more in depth in some ways than other data centers do. Then there are also co-location providers. That's what EdgeCore is. That's what Stack is. Some of these other providers are. And what they've done is they've found a niche in the market that says, hey, you big hyperscalers, instead of spending hundreds of millions to build a building, to buy gens, to buy UPS, to buy all this infrastructure to actually build a data center, we'll build it for you. All you got to do is sign a lease agreement with us, and we'll rent it to you. And we'll maintain all of the environment. We'll maintain temperature. We'll maintain power within the limitations you set for us. So those limitations are called SLAs, service level agreements. So they have in their contract, they'll have a thing that says, I have to have power 100% of the time. I can never go down. So to that effect, that means not only do they have utility power, now we better have some UPS battery backup, and we've got standby generators. So all of that infrastructure needs to be maintained and taken care of as well. So then also environmentally, they'll have temperature ranges. Hey, I need humidity to stay between 20 and 80% at all times. And I don't even want a rate of change that's going to change more than 10 degrees Celsius in an hour. Like they have all sorts of rules around that type of stuff. And temperature guidelines. Hey, the days of data centers that were just running frozen cold anymore, those are kind of long gone. Now they've got this wide range of 64 degrees to 94 degrees. And I've been in data centers where they were, 90 degrees all the time, because the equipment can handle it now. But in those situations now, as a person that's got to work in those areas, well, now we got to have other protocols from safety aspect to kind of think about, hey, that's pretty hot in there. Every 20 minutes, we're gonna have to step out and take a break. Don't be just sitting in there. But those type of infrastructures now, they have contracts, like I said, where, hey, you're gonna maintain these environments in the way you want to. And now these big companies, all they got to do is move their equipment, their IT equipment, into that data hall. And then states like Arizona and others, they're offering tax breaks for these big companies to move their data center equipment, move their company's IT infrastructure into the state. And so they'll give them a tax break that says all of the IT equipment that you buy for that data center will be tax-free. So can you imagine, a 1,000,000 square feet building, which is what Apple was, for out there at Signal Butte, full of IT equipment, how much equipment that's of costing of IT equipment. I mean, we're more into the hundreds of millions, right? So they are getting that much in tax breaks. It's unbelievable. So having that infrastructure in place from a contract and from the physical infrastructure, now that's where, as the provider, the owner of the building, and now I want to maintain all of those power and temperature issues, I've got to have other providers that are there to support me. So now I've got system guys that I have on call. I have contracts with Smart Hands folks, with chiller guys, with generator guys, and they have to have a response time that says 4 hours, I need you on site. Within the first hour that I'm calling you, you need to be responding to me and maybe trying to log in and talk us through whatever the issue is and whether or not it's something where we need to do something different, So giving us an idea of, hey, how bad of an issue do we have? But that idea, I just wanted to expand your guys' mindset about the IT world does a lot of it. There is a data center aspect of it, but it could be, just part of that hemisphere, part around it that's supporting it. So maybe you're just kind of coming in, doing your job, and then getting out, or you're just somehow kind of on that outer end of it, where you're kind of interacting with it from afar. Either way, you're going to be part of that hemisphere. That is part of what that whole IT world is, right? Want to talk a little about some of the physical aspects of what that talks about working in a data center and all those things? Yeah.
I don't know if I can follow all that, but I do want to highlight a couple of the things that Kendall talked about and just kind of give my own experience with that. So I came into data centers about 5 years ago. I was in nuclear power for close to 20 years, and that's kind of what my history is. And then I don't know if you guys follow nuclear power in the United States. We're not really doing so well right now. At best, I'd say we're just kind of staying flat. Not a lot of career opportunity, not a lot of opportunity for growth. So I started looking around, found these things called data centers. I've never even heard of them when I first started looking. That was about 5 years ago. When I first walked into a data center, we had 4 megs in there, and that was the whole data center. And then about 2 years later, when I walked into my next data center, our one building was 44 megawatts. We were building a 300 megawatt campus. But then we're just talking out there, and how big is the one you guys? What's your?
Yeah, we're going to be doing 500 megawatts. So, I mean, yeah.
Jesse and Kendall, can you explain what that means when you're saying a megawatt campus? I'm not sure that everybody understands what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, so the megawatts, really, that's just all the power coming in to the campus to power all the IT equipment, but you also have to power everything else on site. But pretty much everything is going to be critical power going to the computers to run those, or chillers, or basically the infrastructure. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of conceptualize. I will say this, like, I'm trying to conceptualize that megawatt power to what that means to us. I think, as I've tried to research it, I think at the 2020 census, they showed that the average household in Arizona uses about 20,000 kilowatts a year.
Kilowatts.
Yeah,
not
so we're not
megawatt.
even and that's just continuously for a year, right? But we're talking as a data center, when we talks about like a 4 megawatt data center, that's how much IT load is being used every minute, right? Every minute of that time. It could conceivably be that much load being used all the time. Now, what we typically find in the industry is they have buffers on how much power they're actually going to use. They're not going to, a lot of times, especially historically, they've overprescribed how much power they actually, buy versus what they actually use. But I will say this, they're getting smarter about that because they're hiring facilities guys that says, hey, you paid for 4 megawatts power, but you're only using 2. You might want to think about using it, right? So that just means on your distribution to your cabinets, how are you using it? So I would say typically on your network cabinets as a concept, I think each receptacle typically is about 2.5 kW is what the basic number is. So like a 5 kW cabinet, especially for network, is pretty standard fare. And from a computing aspect, what we're finally starting to see is, that number of how much kW per cabinet is growing, right? I think maybe 5-6 years ago, I started seeing 20 kW cabinets, more regularly, more often than not. That was kind of the standard fare. Then all of a sudden, you started seeing every once in a while 100 kW cabinets, every once in a blue moon. It's a big mainframe that they kind of put in there. But now with AI, I mean, that's what they're talking about. They're trying to push like every one of those cabinets within that data hall being like 100 kW at a minimum. So they're just, that amount of power consumption is it's hard to fathom. From a megawatt aspect, just from just a weird fact that I had heard, and take it for what it is. The conflict that we've got going on, and I don't want to get too political, but the conflict that we've got going on with Israel and Palestine right now. One of the weird factoids that I keyed into, because it's just how my mind works, the UN put out a comment that all of the Gaza Strip, the power consumption of the whole Gaza Strip, which supports 2 million people, was about 187 megawatts of power. So just think, like, that's how much 2 million people can. Obviously, that's way less than what they need. So I mean, I think you can kind of safely say, really, like, 100 megawatts of power is for like 1 million people. That would be kind of the normal kind of number. But it's just kind of weird to think about that number of how much power we're actually consuming for data centers alone. But I will say this. I mean, those of you that are kind of concerned about some of the sustainability aspects of where we're going with power industry and how, in being environmentally responsible, data centers are driving a lot of that. I will say that. So for those of you who want to be want to make, have a good career field, but also are kind of conscious about what you're trying to do and leaving your mark in this world, all of the big hyperscalers now, if we want to do business with them, as an owner of a co-location, I want all the big hyperscalers, right? I want all the big 5, but all of them have requirements that you need to be coming, net zero on waste, carbon neutral, getting to those things, trying to get to all of those commitments by 2030, 2050, whichever accords they're kind of following. They're aligning themselves with a lot of that stuff. And so as a person who's providing a service to them and wants to get their business, we're answering that call. We're going to say we're doing that. We're following with that. And then we're passing that on as things that we need to do along with our community and our providers as well. So now we're influencing all of those contracts that we have with our people, with our providers. We're trying to do that as well. And then from the power company, it's amazing to think, like, just this year, how much all that to talk about the Colorado River and how much that's impacted, Arizona. We actually have a pretty good relationship with SRP, and that was one of the first questions I asked. Where are we at with how are we doing with the water in SRP and utility wise? And they're actually at a great level. They're at 100% capacity. They have no concerns. They're even able to, as we're talking about, hey, we're going to build a 500 megawatt campus. Where are we at in a few years? They're right on pace. They said we are good for the next 10 years. But they also know, but we're making moves to keep going, because they also have to be, they're following those carbon zero initiatives as well. So kind of keep that in mind. I would think just with when we're talking about data centers, all of that efforts, sometimes businesses actually can drive some of that change a little bit better because there's money behind why we need that, right?
And it's not just limited to power. So when you're putting power in, when electricity comes in, it creates heat. So you got to get rid of the heat. So the other half of that is all the cooling systems in there that we have to then get all that heat out of the building. We don't want to destroy the computers. So the other thing that to the point that he just made, two of the big things that we really look at, PUE was always the number one thing everybody looked at, and that's your efficiency, basically, of the building. But recently, and actually when we first met, we were talking about that at a conference, is WUE. And this is especially important to us here in Arizona, water usage efficiency. So, you know, not to throw any specific companies under a bus, but we had one close to us that brought in swamp coolers to try to cool their building. And every day, trucks and trucks of water are just going by to go and try to do that. Now, obviously, as we're the number 2 data center location right now in the United States. So as more companies are coming here, we're learning it, we're getting more efficient, we're learning, hey, maybe we shouldn't put swamp coolers in here if we're gonna have to truck or bring in all this water all the time, so.
I would say on top of that, I mean, from a concept of water, I think just down the road, and I don't mind throwing them under the bus just because they're not me, but Apple just right down the road as a concept, you were able to see kind of plumes of clouds of water. They do have to report, you know, how much water, because you can find that stuff out, but they use 1 million gallons of water a day, right? It's a crazy amount of number. From a concept of what my whole building and irrigation and all of that, I'm barely using 700,000 gallons a year, right? Like it's crazy to think, why are we, you know, be a little bit more conscious about the environment. But to his point, your measures at the time when they built it was different. You're looking at power. So guess what? When you see that you have water as it's considered free cooling, you don't have to use you don't use as much electricity, but you're using another resource, right? And it's a scarce resource for the area. You know, it'd be one thing if this was, you know, Minnesota or something where for the Great Lakes, you've got plenty of water. But here, that doesn't make sense. So trying to be conscious of what we're doing, you know, in this environment, that's the thing where I think data centers are hearing that from our clients, and we're becoming very conscious of like, hey, we got to be great partners with the community. Part of this, it's hand in hand. As much as we're there because, hey, we're satisfying an infrastructure need, we also know that you as the consumers have that kind of power to say, you got dollars you can spend about, hey, I want my companies that I spend money on thinking about how they're impacting the environment, right?
And that's so to kind of get into a little bit of what I do. It's not only safety. So we either go by HSE, which is health, safety, environmental, or EHS, environmental health safety. It just depends on the company you work for. So you know, all the companies really, like we're talking about, are following these things called ESGs. We're trying to get better at not using all these resources, getting our efficiencies down. Laws are coming out now that we have to follow for a lot of this stuff. And honestly, because a lot of our organizations are global, Europe is actually getting a hit with a lot of it right now. So America basically follows. So they start doing it, and then we see what they're doing. We're like, all right, well, we need to also go and do those same type of efficiencies. So a lot of that's actually coming over here. But to kind of talk a little bit more about the different roles and different things you can do within data centers. I started as a data center technician 5 years ago on shift. I was a night shift technician. Had no idea what I was doing except for I knew what I was doing in the data center, but that's it. I was working data center. I sat at a computer, answered alarms and all that stuff. Luckily, we had an opening for I made the opening for the safety guy. So our safety guy got promoted. He moved up to another position. He was the managing director, and he was still given safety orientation. So I kind of jumped in and said, do you want some help with that? I can help. I can jump in. I can do some orientations and toolbox talks and all that. And with a nuclear background, everything that we do is safety. Everything. Same thing with what we do in data centers. We're considered critical facilities. So we can't make mistakes. We can't go and open the wrong breaker. That'll cost the company $1 million if we take a customer down. Easily. So we can't do that. So a lot of what we talk about, and a lot of the things that we do in safety, we talk about behaviors. And we talk about, so there's two sides. There's compliance, which is the law. It's OSHA. We have to do it. So my job is to know all those laws and go and bring those and create our policies, our procedures, and then make sure we're actually following it. So I'll have to do incident investigations. I'll have to go fly. I just had to fly to San Jose last month because we had some guys that went and opened a breaker or started a generator, and I had people in the panel when they started it. Luckily, we did so bad, they were in the wrong panel. So it actually put them in a safer place being in the wrong panel when my team started their generator than if they would have been where we asked them to be. So that's a lot of what I do is I help teach those behaviors, because an easy way to change that is the guy who made the mistake, all he had to do was kind of take a look around the corner and see that the wrong panel was open. But he didn't think to stop and do that because that just wasn't what was on his mind. But he could have killed somebody. And if they would have been in there and they were landing it on the actual bus bars, if they would have, it would have killed them. So that's a lot of what we do. And I didn't come into this. I never, one of my two favorite questions in this job, in this industry, are what got you into data centers and what got you into safety? So nobody started in data centers. I mean, well, you've been in it for 15 years now, but
I did not start in it for sure, yeah.
People just kind of tripped into data centers. They happened to work with somebody that worked in a data center and they got them in, or they were a Cummings vendor who then went in and they got hired onto the building. So that's how people kind of got into data centers. For the history of data centers, people just kind of got into it. Same thing with safety. I was an operator, and I still tell people I'm an operator. I've been in operations. The only thing is I happen to be doing safety right now. So, and there's a ton of different things in our industry. We need people that can be accountants. We need people that can do marketing. We need people that can go out and think of a job, somebody in a data center has to do it. So the thing that I like about data centers that's completely different from my life in nuclear power. When I was in nuclear power, like I said, I had to go live in Mississippi. I don't recommend it. Anybody from Mississippi, I apologize. I also lived in Pennsylvania. Wasn't too bad, but I still had to live 40 miles outside the city because you don't put nuclear power plants near cities or near people. People don't like that too much. And then, so when I started seeing these data centers, they were everywhere. And the growth in data centers is so exponential. The reason that we're here, and Kendall kind of talked about it a little bit, is we just don't have any people. We're building these data centers so fast that we can't find enough people with any experience. Because before, we could just grab a couple military people or go grab a couple Cummins techs or HVAC techs and say, hey, come work in a data center. And we'll pay you $25 an hour, and that'll work, which we can't do that anymore. There's just nobody left. So that's why, the two big things really affecting data centers, I'd say, is people and power. We're trying to work on the power thing, and we're trying to work on the people thing. But getting your foot in the door into the industry and then finding what your direction is. I never in a million years, looking back at 20-year-old me or 30-year-old me, I would get into safety. Because when I was in the Navy, you were a sissy if you wore gloves. Like, what do you mean? And these are steam valves. So these are hot steam valves. And if you were to touch it without gloves, it hurt. But I was in the Navy, and you weren't allowed to be a sissy, so you had to use without gloves or not wear a hard hat or not, because we're men. That's what we do. That was a whole different world, and that's the one that I came from. So now I get to teach, and that's one of the cool things I like about safety is I get to work with everybody in the company. I'm not stuck just, operations gets a little siloed sometimes where they're on site and everybody else is somewhere else or remote. But with safety, I get to work with, my HR team, my accountant team, my operations teams, development, construction, all of that stuff. So if you think that, you know, being an operator or being a tech is just not your thing, you don't like sitting at a computer, you don't like doing these, there's a ton of different opportunities that you guys can take. So don't limit yourself on, this is where I have to go. Because I'll tell you, every path that I've taken, that wasn't where I originally started. I started, you know, I was in the Navy, got out of the Navy because I wanted to be an electrical engineer. That was the first thing. So I went to the University of Colorado to be an electrical engineer. Realized I hated it. I hated sitting behind a computer not talking to people. I like being out talking to people, meeting people, and doing that type of stuff. I hated sitting behind a desk and not interacting with people. And with the Navy experience and everything I did, it was going to take me a long time in my career to get back to where I could just be at that time. So that's when I said, well, I'm going to go work in nuclear power. I made that mistake for about 10 years. And then, like I said, I got into data centers. But I mean, honestly, getting that experience, getting into a career field, and just learning how to work and get out there and all the different stuff, that's the most important thing. Is you're not going to end up where you originally thought I was going to be or you were going to be. So, but on the path there, that's when you get to have fun and learn all these different things and all that. So I would say pick something, go with it, and I'll say data centers is a great place to work.
I just want to add in on the safety stuff. I love the fact that, you know, you're passionate about it. And one thing I would say is I agree with you. Growing up in the industry, around electricians and all of that, I can't believe when I look back now, you know, that I was crimping on connectors and landing circuits on things that were 12,470 volts. And I was barely, you know, a year in the industry because that was the way they taught things. It was just, hey, put on these gloves, put on this suit, do this thing, right? But what I like about what's kind of changed in society in general is like just the days of, hey, just do what I'm telling you just because, and that's the way it always is. That doesn't have to stay that way, right? And I think part of that is because people have gotten hurt too many times. And I think one of the things that I think we've come to realize is like the biggest part of what we're doing, no matter what it is that we got to go home every day with all of our fingers, hopefully, right? With all of our appendages. So I think what's happened with a lot of these type of instances like you're talking about is there'll be kind of a follow-up reports on this. Hey, what went wrong? What could we have done better? You ask the 5 whys, dig into the issue, and then you start, you know, asking, well, why can't we do things better than that? And so today, more than anything else that I've ever seen, we barely do any live electrical work. It is completely shut off. Unless you have some override, right? I know there are some very rare circumstances, some old electrical circuits where, hey, there is no off switch, so that's the only way, right? But anything newer enough today, there's a breaker, there's some kind of disconnect. We can turn it off. And if the concern is from a business perspective, because that was another answer at the data center, well, it can never go offline. The customers don't want to turn anything off. But we have redundancies in place. Let them fall back onto their redundancies, and we're going to work on the one side. This other side will stay up. They're going to be reduced redundancy. But now we got to sell that to them. That's part of the conversation, and I think that's the other part these hyperscalers have helped drive too. They've embraced that aspect of safety first, right? Safety is not a secret, and it needs to be the first thing that we do. You know, to the extent where I kind of laugh, I see that ladder in there.
Yeah.
We want to speak to that?
Yeah,
Go right ahead. Go ahead. Run with it. Yeah.
It's not strapped.
No, so and this really came from Microsoft. So it's called Ladders Last. It's the last thing you can do if you're going to work at heights is use a ladder. There's a lot of other ways to do things. You can either do administrative controls, engineering controls, let's bring in scaffolding, because what they found, and I don't remember the exact statistics, but it was, I'll say 25%, which is totally made up, but it's close. It was about 25% of the injuries that they were getting were coming just from ladders, people falling off ladders, tripping on ladders.
It's definitely the leading factor for injuries in the construction industry.
Yeah. So what they did is they said, no, you have to get a permit basically to use a ladder. You have to fill it out. You have to get permission. They made it so hard to use a ladder that you don't want to use a ladder at that point anyways. So the other thing that came out, and unfortunately this came due to an incident, is the industry is also going to, if you see the climbing style helmets, where you have a chin strap or underneath your chin and everything, and that came from an incident within the industry. Somebody was doing something in a truck. This was during construction, fell off, hard hat came right off, hit his head, and I mean, last I knew, he was still a vegetable at that time. I don't know if he's improved or not, but that's changed our industry. And when we say like Google, AWS, Microsoft, those are the big ones we're talking about, and they're the ones that drive it. They'll come in and look at all of my safety procedures, policies, everything. They look at how many injuries we have, what's our observation program. That's one of the big things that they look at when they're looking at a company and saying, yeah, we're going to spend, how many millions of dollars signing a lease with you guys. They want to know all of our safety stuff. And then we'll have monthly meetings with them where they talk about, all right, what's been going on at the site? How are you guys doing? What is this incident? Let's go over this incident. The one that happened that I kind of talked about earlier, if that would have happened at one of our Microsoft sites, it would have been horrendous for us. I mean, it was horrendous for me as the incident itself, but the amount of pain basically that one of the hyperscalers would bring to us for an incident where nobody got hurt, we didn't break anything, but we could have, which is important to me, is we could have. That is enough for them to say, hold on, we basically need to look at everything again. You guys are going to be on a performance improvement plan, and you don't want to be in that world. So that's where safety is today, it's up in the forefront. And not only do we care about the safety, and I don't just care about the safety of the people on the site, that's why we talked about environmental, health, and safety. Health is a big part of it, and I think that's another thing coming into our industry is we have to care about the whole worker. I don't just care about you 9 to 5 while you're at the office. I care about, are you taking care of yourself? Are you mentally strong? Do you need assistance? Do you need help with something? That's another part of what we do is we care about those type of things because, and honestly, part of it is selfish. I'll tell you, part of it is I know that you're going to be a better worker if you're fully taken care of, mental health wise and all that, because I've seen so many times somebody came in, they're grumpy from the weekend, they're angry, they're pissed, and then they go make a mistake because they're not concentrating on the things that they should, which is their health, their safety, and the safety of those around them. So that's where we're going as an industry, is getting better at all that type of stuff.
I would say that you mentioned engineering controls and process controls. I mean, that's where, from a lot of what we do, we have to have process documentation that helps us for this. I will say, among the IT world, process documentation tends to be one of the last things I think they think about, right? In a lot of ways, it feels like, hey, just plug this in there, just follow the directions that they're kind of telling you. But getting that actually kind of captured in a process document, it's there to protect you. It's there to make sure that you're doing the right steps, right? Not only just so that there's not mistakes, but also so that you're doing it the safe way that's possible. So when I say, what I'm thinking about too is from a design aspect, even from the engineering aspect, one of the great things that I've been able to do in my role now is actually kind of speak to, like, hey, any new building you're building, hey, where do people have to reach? Hey, if they're sitting at a workstation, what does that look like for them on where they're looking, where they're having to pay attention to, how their posture is going to be on there? Like, all of those type of ergonomic aspects of what the job is are getting kind of thought of more and more, because, to his point, we want the workers there for as long as possible. We want them to be there. They want to hold on to them as long as possible. And the idea that where you see some of these companies that are bringing all of kind of those health and wellnesses onto the campus, some of the nicer ones, I will say, like, they'll have the fitness center on site. They'll have the cafes on site. That's why they're doing it. It's not just to attract all the big talent. It's also to say, like, hey, the happier you are, the healthier you are here, the more that we can influence that, we'll put it right at your fingertips. It makes it a little bit easier for you guys to get it. That's part of all of that process, right? I think, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I want to break out to.
I have some questions. So are there any questions?
Do you want to get a microphone?
Oh, yeah, we want to.
We run
Thank
into,
you.
you gotta talk to the mic.
Yes.
I wanted to ask a student with like no credential, no experience, what can I do currently or later on to get my foot in the door, for the job or anything?
Say that one more time. What can you do as a student with like lack of experience? Is that what you said?
Yeah, lack of experience, no credential, no degree,
Yeah.
but like, is there like any opportunity for somebody to like do part-time or intern?
I know, I heard those questions the last time too, and I will say this. I feel like there is
Just talking to that.
okay. There is a need. Yeah, there is a need enough that the schooling that you're getting here with the certifications, that's enough to kind of get you attracted into there. Like, okay, you're already going to be a step above somebody off of the street that's just trying to hire in, right? You're already that, right? I know Brian the last time talked about, hey, connect in with the LinkedIn networking, all of that type of stuff. But I would say also, like, sometimes it's just a matter of if you're, like you're saying, if you're just trying to get, I would, especially if you have an idea of the companies that you really want to work for, right? It's like, if you know, hey, I want to be somewhere in that company, I want to do something for them in the IT world, get in there and do whatever it takes to kind of get in there. I would say, and here was my experience. Right out of ASU, when I got my network engineering degree, I knew I wanted to get into data centers. At that time, and this would have been 2009, I was looking for, all right, one of the biggest things out there, the commercials were for GoDaddy, right? And so I was like, hey, GoDaddy in the Valley was kind of heating up, right? And so I knew I wanted to work for GoDaddy. I had heard a lot of great things from other people that had worked there. But, they didn't always have network jobs open. But what they did have, and they always did, was they had their sales, they had their call center jobs, right? So I did the call center deal. I was the graveyard shift call center guy for like 6 months. And then that was where it was weird. It kind of all happened serendipitously, where like, I was still looking for a data center job, but all of a sudden multiple kind of roles opened up to me where, hey, I had my choice. There was GoDaddy had a data center opening up, and this other data center had a opening up, and so I actually interviewed for both, but I didn't actually end up working for GoDaddy. I went to this other data center instead. But so to your question, I feel like sometimes you'd be surprised. Just being in those spaces can get you that leg up. Now, what that might mean is that maybe you're not taking your dream job at first, right? And here's my other example I'll give you. One of the best technicians that I've ever had, that I ever hired, that I always kind of tout. In 2017, I hired this, I say kid off the street, but he was actually a security officer on site. I was running a campus of 8 buildings. I had 7 technicians at the time, so I was desperately in need of people. I finally got corporate to open up recs and said, you can hire 5 more people, and I was happy. But now I need to hire 5 people. But same thing, even at that point, was like I couldn't grab people fast enough. Like what data center we're going to steal them from? And then I didn't have the biggest budget to necessarily pull anybody. But all of a sudden, the guys are like, well, hey, what about this guy over there? He's really good at his job as a security officer. He seems pretty cool. He's young. He's hungry. It's like, well, let's talk. Let's see what's up. But what he brought to the table for me was, he had no experience. He had no idea. I think literally this might have been his second job he'd ever had out of high school, right? By me hiring him. His first job was this security job. So it was a big risk, but what the advantage that he brought to the table was he was smart enough to do his job well, and he stood out. And then the next thing was that he knew the campus. He knew the names of the buildings. He knew what the equipment was. He didn't know what it does, but he knew the names. Yeah, the UPS is in the UPS rooms. The generators are in the gen yard. The chillers are up on the roof. Like, he didn't know anything about them, but he knew where they were. And knew where, like, that was half the battle of, like, somebody getting hired in off the street. It was like, you're not going to even know where anything is for, like, the first 3 months, right? You're still kind of finding your way around. So he had that advantage. So I would say the funny thing is we hired him. He was just a tech, and within 4 years, he became a chief engineer. He's now my facilities manager over at EdgeCore. I mean, it's crazy to think how quickly you can stand out in the data center industry if you do your job well, because there's not very many people who actually are knowledgeable about all the things, or at least willing to learn all the things. There is so much to learn in the data center world from a systems aspect: electrical, mechanical, fire systems, controls, all of that type of stuff. There's so many different things that you can just focus on one, or take a little bit of everything and become just, hey, answer guy. And sometimes that can be enough.
And
Go
I'll
ahead.
say that's not isolated. Coming over from security, one of the people I'm looking for to hire as my safety manager out in San Jose was a security guard, and this is in Dallas. So he started as a security guard, got hired on the operations team, and he applied for one of the positions before, and I had a great talk with him. He didn't make that cut, but we're looking at another role in San Jose, and he's in the he's in the running for that. And we have another person in San Jose is a security guard. So it's not a unrealistic or a isolated incident. And the other thing is, so I'm here with AFCOM, which is one of the networking groups. And what we do is we actually have an internship that we do over the summer. It's a 10-week paid $18 an hour internship at end user data centers. So at, Stream, at, unfortunately, Stack doesn't have any data centers here in Phoenix yet, but eventually we will get some. So we are looking for interns to come in. I'll make sure that you get all the information to share out. We're starting the community college. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a roadmap. So you come in and we have the community college program that we're putting together for a certificate or for your associates to be a data center technician. Now that will help you get your foot in the door if you have that certificate. We run the same program in Northern Virginia, and it was really cool. It just happened. We were talking yesterday over at Mesa Community College, and I happened to get a LinkedIn post popped right before, and it was one of the ladies. She's over 40, never worked in data centers. And we actually have, with Stack, we have this program called Women in Data Centers. But we try to bring just females with no experience. We try to bring them into the data center, and then we teach them everything that they need to know. So they start off as interns, and then we, build them up. And her post was that she had finally finished her S1 quals, and she had finally got fully qualified as a technician. So there are a lot of different paths in, but we do have an internship program here in the Valley, 10 weeks in the summer. So I'll make sure you guys get that information. But sorry, I distracted myself. So we started with the community college program. Then the next part is the internship, where then whoever wants to go and work in the industry, we can get them internships, working 10 weeks. We do have IT side and the facility side, so it's not just facility. We also have some customers that they do their own rack and stack and all that, and they run all their own. So that's what we did last year. We actually had 2 that were on the IT side, 2 on the facility side, and out of the 6 that we had last year, 1 got hired, and that was because the other 5 went back to school. So they went and they wanted to finish their degree. So we're trying to get 20 this year. That's our goal that we've been shooting for. And I mean, last year was our first year. We had 6, and we put it together in about 6 months. This year, like I said, we're hoping for 20. And depending on how many the end users want, once we get there, those numbers will probably only go up. So.
What would I need to do to get into the internship program?
Yeah, so I'll get all the information over.
You have to be a good student to start with.
Yeah. Just put that on your
Yeah.
resume, good student.
Right? I mean,
Yeah, I'll make sure you guys get the information.
part of it.
I'm actually going to we're both going to be adjunct professors for the community college program. What's the name? I can't remember.
It's for
Data
the-
center
for the
technician.
Data center technician.
Certificate. So we're going to be each doing a class. I'll be over at Estrella Mountain, and then Kendall will be out at Mesa.
Yeah.
So, but it'll be an email, and we're not as sophisticated that we have a website all set up or any of that yet, but we're getting there. We're getting closer. We're getting more people involved. It was me and 2 other people last year when we did it, and you know, none of us had ever done it before, put together an internship program and, you know, found end users and did it. So we were kind of doing it on the fly when we were doing it originally.
We're working on it too. So
Yeah.
it's gonna, I mean, again, the data centers are just beginning to build out here, right? So it'll be in process, something that we're working on.
Yep.
And you don't have to have an internship to get a job, right? I mean, that's.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
just with it. I mean, I don't know how far you guys are right now with your education, but I'll tell you, every data center right now is looking for people
Right.
here in the Valley. For one of our presentations we talked about, I went and Googled just data center jobs in Phoenix, and it was like 200 something jobs that immediately popped up, and then
Variety of different, not just IT.
Well,
but
and
again, a plethora of jobs.
and that was the other thing. I did a search to say what types of jobs, and it was everything you could think of. The search thing was about that big on Google, and then the other thing that I looked at was the companies. And there, so many companies are here. Like I said, we're the second biggest in the United States now, and we probably won't stay second forever because Northern Virginia is out of power. They don't have any more power left. They can't really build for at least 5 years.
Yeah, there's
So-
the waiting list. We have to
They'll
even
have
get
to
power.
build out their grid.
Yes.
They gotta build out their
Yes.
grid, right? So
Correct.
we're kind of equipped here in Arizona. We have a fairly stable grid at this point.
And we have a nice nuclear plant right down the street.
Yeah,
so.
we do that too.
All right, who else has a question? Okay.
There's a question online. Oh, Viviana, go ahead, you got it.
So we have a question from one of our online listeners. They're asking if for the women in data centers, do they have to have minimum hiring qualifications before they can serve as an intern?
I'd have to look. I'm pretty sure let me have the mic. I'd have to look at the exact program. It usually would be a high school diploma or equivalent. And honestly, I think right now that's all it is, at least with my company. Unfortunately, we don't have anything here in Phoenix, so it would have to be at one of our other locations. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
So can I just say something? So again, I think a lot of people know, and I've talked about it before, and that is there's a huge gap of, a gender gap between men and women in the field of IT, right? And really, from the conversations that I've had with the iMasons, they're really working on closing that gap. So we really need to have a broad diversity of people working. It makes a better work environment. It creates better troubleshooting, better problem solving. And so, again, I thank you for that. So if you're a woman out there, or people, women that you think this could fit them, get them into it. This is a trainable, learnable skill. Right? People are not born as IT geniuses, right? This is a learnable skill. This is something that anyone can be trained to do, learn to do. And so, there's a lot of people that can be good at these jobs. So.
Along that front, I would say, one thing that I've noticed, that just from differently kind of, from kind of the male, female kind of gender biases that we have of like, oh, this are the roles we kind of fill into, right? And what we're expected to kind of do. It's amazing to think about just the perspective that we're coming from kind of steers us to whatever, right? So one of the things that's always kind of steered me was because of my family history, military background, service was always important to me. And I know that for a lot of you, that's a thing that's also important. So when you think about oh, I'm not really into the technical, running into all that, doing all that aspect of it. One of the things that hit home for me when COVID happened, when COVID happened, obviously the world changed, all that type of stuff. But when we all of a sudden became, hey, I had to have this special paper that said I could be out on the road because now we were critical workers that needed to, that we had to be supporting the infrastructure so the society could run, right? All of a sudden having the infrastructure in place to say oh, we're actually helping Zoom calls happening, for families to stay in touch, right? For medical people to have their appointments with their patients remotely. Like being able to be that IT person that also does that. Maybe you're not that, you know, if that kind of stuff is really what's appealing to you. Like that's, I think, something where sometimes that perspective of what our gender wants us, you know, kind of puts on us. Like I feel like sometimes you feel like, oh, I've got this role we were supposed to fill, but don't be afraid to think like, hey, you can fill that role even through a technical aspect, right? Like the technical service that we're providing is actually kind of pivotal to what the human makeup is, right? Like we are actually bringing people together at its best, right? I mean, obviously there's some destructive ways that can get on trolling and all of that type of stuff. But at its best, technology can be used to make things better, right? To help people to kind of connect. I know for right now, I still have family Zoom every month for my family across the country and for my family in the Philippines. For those of you who are internationally, like I have reconnected with my family in the Philippines that I never knew. And I don't speak Tagalog. I don't speak Filipino, but we muddle through it, right? We get through there and are just happy to see each other, right, and connect. So just think about that type of stuff too as we're talking about this IT field and where that can kind of go for you. Like it doesn't always have to be just all about the bits and bytes and all of the programming and all of that type of stuff, all the technical aspect of it.
Okay. All right. If there's any last questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So I don't know what next month's
Yeah, we'll find out, I guess. I'm not
what
sure
next
exactly.
month's
Yeah.
event is going to be, but we'll have another one in April too.
Yes.
So, okay. It's going to be the last Wednesday of the month. So, and we'll put out a flyer like we did this time. So it'll be the last Wednesday of the month. Okay. And then again, we'll have one in May, but it's going to be May 17th. It's going to be May 17th. What is it? What's the date? Is that the last Wednesday? So April 24th. Yeah. And it'll be in here, 6:30 to 7:30. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, it was so good. Yeah, it was so good. Thank you.
Yeah, they actually have a big entry level one for like $50,000.
A big entry level
Data center,
job, you mean?
job in
Yes,
Phoenix.
that doesn't surprise me.
Tech systems.
Yes, those are all yours.
Oh god, that's a TV. Yeah, that's what it was saying. Oh, it's called TEK. Tech systems.
Anytime you're working on like you have a virtual server,
That's a long
My class, let's take a break. All right, it is 7:38, let's come back at 7:45. 7:45, okay? And I'm sure Jesse and Kendall will take questions out there if you have questions for them.
I might go online tonight and apply for tech systems.
That's a contractor, not a data center. Do they have a job? Yeah, that is a contractor, but they place people in the data centers.
They have a data center job.
Yeah. So you would